Hi, fourth graders. So we're finally going to get started reading The Orphan of Ellis Island. You'll need your book and your packet, your questions to go with our novel study, okay? So last time you filled out this page telling about the title, the author, number of pages, if you're interested in it or not. So if you haven't filled this in your very best work, make sure that you go back and do this, okay? So today we're going to find, according to you, chapters 1 and 2. So we're going to read through the story. I'm going to stop and ask you questions as we read, and then we'll do this page together at the end, and then you'll have homework too. So we're going to read just 2 chapters today, okay? So go ahead and find your book and find chapter 1. All right, chapter 1. Welcome to Ellis Island, the ranger from the National Park Service said to the group of 5th graders standing before her. This museum is dedicated to the millions of immigrants who pass through these buildings on their way to becoming American citizens. There was one 5th grader, however, who was not thinking about the buildings or the millions of immigrants who passed through them. This 5th grader was thinking about his feet. If only they would stop growing, Dominic Cantori thought. He stared down at his toes, which were painfully squeezed into a pair of old sneakers. Then he looked around at all the sneakers on his classmates' feet. Some looked as if they had never been worn before. Dominic sighed. He longed to have a new fashionable pair of sneakers, a pair that fit. But he knew it wasn't going to happen anytime soon. So we can already start to make some inferences about Dominic here. What can you kind of infer about Dominic? I infer that he's poor because he's longing for a new pair of shoes, new sneakers, and he's looking at everybody else's. So he's not very rich because he keeps thinking about other people's stuff and how he wants to have it too. Having new fashionable sneakers and keeping up with Dominic's quickly growing feet was almost impossible as long as he lived with one foster family after another. His feet had grown so much in the past few weeks that he was unable to tie his laces, and he finally just pulled them out. Whenever he could, when no one was watching, he would slip his feet out of the tight sneakers so that his cramped toes couldn't bend. He checked now to see that no one was looking, and as the ranger talked on, Dominic silently worked his left heel out of his sneaker. As we search our family trees, many of us can find relatives who came through Ellis Island as immigrants, the ranger continued. Dominic stood for a moment, wiggling his free toes within his sock, wondering about his family tree. What would it look like? He imagined a little twig with one tiny leaf hanging from it. On the leaf was his name. That was it. Dominic had never known his family. His parents had both died when he was a baby. He had no sisters or brothers. There were no grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, or uncles. The state had tried to locate any living relatives, but none could be found. Dominic had become a ward of the state, and no one had come to claim him, so meaning that the state kind of took care of him or watched out for him. Now he was living with his 3rd foster family this year in Brooklyn, New York. Besides a few possessions that fit into 3 suitcases, the most important thing that Dominic owned was a gold key that hung from a chain around his neck. You could see that the key was very old. It had been with his mother's belongings when she died. It's not real gold, a kid in one of his classes had pointed out, but that didn't matter to Dominic. What mattered were the initials, SC, scratched onto the key. Dominic loved to rub his fingers over them. Sal Cantori had been his father's name, and he was certain the key must have belonged to him. The key's history, like Dominic's, was a mystery. He had no idea what it was meant to open, but it was the only thing left from his family, something he could touch, something solid. It was his lucky key, and he wore it always on a chain around his neck. But Dominic wasn't sure just how much his lucky key was working. In fact, he had been a kid with incredibly bad luck. Dave Santos, his caseworker, had called him just yesterday. Dominic's current foster family regretted to inform him that things weren't going to work out after all. They were moving to California at the end of the month. and they wouldn't be able to take him along. Dave had already begun to look for another family. Dominic had not been surprised. He had grown accustomed to things not working out. Even so, the old fear of being abandoned and of having to move in with strangers left his stomach in knots. Once again, Dominic was haunted with the familiar question, what would these new people be like? Where would he sleep? Who would he turn to if something went wrong? And how long would he stay there before he was told to pack his things and move on? Dominic had been with so many families that he had developed a game to help him still the fear of having to fit into yet another new place, with strange people, strange noises, and strange smells. He would lie in his bed at night, whichever bed, in whichever apartment, and as he lay there, he would twist his golden key on his chain and imagine a perfect family, his dream family. In this family, there was always a mother and a father that he would call Mom and Dad. Why is it so important that he's imagining this dream family, do you think? Well, kind of like he said, he has that fear in his stomach of the unknown. But this is something that he knows then, right? It's his dream family, everything he wants it to be. So it kind of helps ease him, calm him down. There would be a refrigerator and cupboards that were always filled with pizza and marshmallows and potato chips that he could have anytime he wanted. There would be warm, homemade brownies on the kitchen table when he came home from school. And best of all, in his dream family, there would be brothers to play with and lots of pets to care for. Sometimes he imagined a sheepdog, and other times he imagined a parrot or a monkey. In real life, Dominic was not allowed to have any pets, because as his caseworker explained, he never knew if the families he stayed with would allow one. Unlike in real life, things were perfect in his dream family. And it was this dream family that saw him through the many scary moves and the many long and lonely nights spent under bedspreads that smelled of other people's houses. Dominic had been in many different schools, in Brooklyn and the Bronx. He had only been at his present school for 3 days when his new teacher, Mr. Howard, had told him that all the 5th grade classes would be going on a trip to Ellis Island the following Monday. That had been perfect timing. Dominic loved class trips. He always hoped that each new trip was going to be his best ever. The soft cadence of the ranger's voice drifted back to him. Many of you may discover your family history right here at Ellis Island Museum. But Dominic knew that he wouldn't be one of the many. Why do you think that? Why does he know? He's like, I'm not going to be one of the many. Because nobody's been able to find his living ancestors, right? No grandma, no grandpa, no aunts, no uncles. How is he going to have anybody on Ellis Island? He wouldn't. All right, let's keep reading. This is so boring. I wish we would get back on the boat, he heard someone whisper. Dominic looked in front of him, where a red-headed boy wearing fancy new sneakers whispered to another boy with bristly blonde hair. Dominic knew they were best friends, but he also knew the red-haired boy's name was Justin. He watched as Justin leaned over and burped in his friend's ear. Dominic felt envious as he watched them. He wished that he had a friend who would lean over and burp in his ear. As Dominic imagined himself with such a friend, he giggled out loud. A boy next to him whispered, "What's so funny?" Immediately, Dominic's smiles vanished and he lowered his eyes to the floor to avoid the boy's gaze. The boy shrugged his shoulders and looked away. Dominic bit down on his lower lip. How he wished he could share his funny thoughts and laugh with someone, but he just didn't know how. Talking to new kids was always hard for him, and new kids were the only kids he ever seemed to meet. Dominic hadn't spoken to anyone except the teacher since he arrived. It was the same in every school. He always hoped that he would make a friend, but he never had. He was painfully shy, and he was never the one to begin a friendship. And by the time the kids in his class got to know him, Dominic was yanked out of that school and sent off to another one. Justin turned around suddenly and looked at Dominic. Then he continued his hushed conversation with his friend. Dominic heard their muffled laughter. He wondered if the kids were laughing at him. He was used to people making fun of the new kid. Dave always told him kids did that because they were uncomfortable with themselves. "I know it's hard," Dave often said, "but you've got to let yourself get past the new kid thing. Just be yourself and trust that people will like you." It always sounded so easy when Dave said that. But learning to trust to trust that people would like him was just one of those things that Dominic didn't think he'd ever be able to do. Everyone's attention was on the ranger now, as she pointed to a display. Dominic leaned forward and worked his other heel out and wiggled his toes in his sock. It was here at Ellis Island that the newly arrived immigrants were questioned and medically inspected to be sure they could support themselves, the ranger said. A boy standing beside Dominic leaned over to look at a display and accidentally stepped hard on Dominic's foot. Dominic yelped in pain and surprise. A number of kids turned to look at him and laughed. He sounded like a howling dog, someone said. The ranger continued to speak over the commotion. Ellis Island has been called the Island of Hope because so many people had hoped to make a new start in America. But it was also called the Island of Tears. Does anybody know why? Tears welled up in Dominic's eyes as a big hand suddenly rested on his shoulder. Maybe this wasn't going to be the best class trip after all, he thought to himself. As he fingered his lucky key, Dominic turned around and looked up to see his teacher's eyes staring sternly into his. So let's go back to that question that Ranger was asking. We did a little bit of research about immigrants' journeys through Ellis Island to America. Why is it called the Island of Tears? Well, we talked about it wasn't easy travels, right? It was really hard. And for a lot of families, they were either leaving people behind or they died on the journey. So it was really, really hard and difficult journey for most of the immigrants. But it was also the Island of Hope because they were hoping for that new start, or for some of them to meet their new family or their family members who had already gone over. All right, we got one more chapter. Chapter 2. This is not the time to be fooling around. Mr. Howard's frown suddenly turned to a look of embarrassment. Dominic could tell that the teacher had forgotten his name. You're making it difficult for the others to pay attention, Mr. Howard finally said. Dominic tried to protest, but the teacher turned his attention back to the group. Dominic bit his lip and tried hard not to cry, as the class watched him with curiosity. Your teachers have told me that you've done research projects in your family histories, the ranger announced in a cheerful voice. I'd love to hear about some of them. Dominic suddenly panicked as he watched a flurry of hands go up in the air. He dug his hands into his pocket and began pulling on the little threads that had frayed from the inside seams. Why don't you take turns? Suggested the ranger. Each of you can tell me which country your family came from. Let's start with this row first, she said, pointing to a girl beside her. Dominic's eyes darted anxiously around the group. How on earth was he supposed to answer this? He felt his face grow hot as the fifth graders, one after another, proudly named relatives that had come to America from all over the world. Poland, Ireland, Russia, Africa, the children called out in turn. Dominic was filled with anger and shame as he lowered his eyes to the floor. The secret that he had carried with him wherever he went from school to school was about to be uncovered. The idea of revealing the truth that he was alone in the world, abandoned and unwanted, filled him with such dread that he would do anything to keep it hidden. The sweat gathered on his forehead as Dominic tried frantically to think of what to say. As the ranger suddenly pointed to him, he reached up and clutched his lucky key with his trembling fingers. And then he opened his mouth to speak. What do you think Dominic's going to say? Don't read ahead. What do you think Dominic's going to say? Do you think he's going to tell the truth and be like, I don't know? Or do you think he's going to make up a country? What would you do? I think I would probably make up a country. Just be like, Switzerland. And just pull something out. But we'll have to see what Tom does tomorrow. All right, so let's take a look at this page of the classwork for chapters 1 and 2. So let's take a look through. We've got some words here. Zoom in a little more. There we go. All right. So we're going to answer the following questions in 1 to 3 complete descriptive sentences. So we talked about this when we did, Shiloh? Shiloh and Stonefox, I believe we talked about answering in full sentences. Do you remember how we did this? We're going to use something to help our answer. We're going to use part of the question to help us re-answer. So we need to know who is the protagonist in this story. So you want to change that question into part of our answer. So I would do, who is the protagonist in this story? I would say, the protagonist in this story is... Now, who is the protagonist? Do you know what a protagonist is? Protagonist is usually somebody who is kind of our main character. Who is the protagonist? Dominic Cantori. Good. What makes the protagonist so different from his classmates? So like this, I'm actually going to make it a little smaller. All right, so we want to reuse part of that question. What makes the protagonist so different from his classmates? So I'm going to say, what makes the protagonist so different from his classmates is that this time, do you see how I kind of had the sentence all the same instead of rewording it? Sometimes we do that. Whatever feels more right. This time, this one felt right to me because I'm going to explain why now. Is that he is an orphan and does not know his family. Because everyone else, remember on the trip, knows, oh, my family came from Poland, from Russia, from Ireland. And he has no idea. What else makes him so different? He also does not have a lot of money or nice clothes. Right? Remember like his shoes he kept talking about? So he's an orphan, doesn't know his family, doesn't have a lot of money, and he doesn't have nice things. He's kind of envious of other people. So now let's think back. Remember, you can pause it any time to write down the answers, okay? Why was Dominic not enjoying his field trip to Ellis Island? So again, now I'm going to reword it with part of my question. Dominic was not enjoying his field trip to Ellis Island because... Why wasn't he? Oh yeah, because he does not know who his family is. And Ellis Island is all about immigrants and people who came, and he doesn't know anything about his family. That's why he doesn't know anything about it. All right, what about the next one? Had you been Dominic, how would you have handled this situation? Kind of like how I asked you at the end of that last chapter. So if you were Dominic, how would you have handled this situation? If I was Dominic, I would have told my class a lie to make them think I fit in. Because he keeps moving around so much. If I was constantly moving around, I want to at least feel welcome for a little bit, but that's just me. What would you have done? You can change your answer for that one. All right, now chapter 2 was really short, but think back, and you can look back at your book if you need. Why was Dominic so nervous during chapter 2? Oh yeah. Dominic was so nervous during chapter 2 because, do you see how we used part of that question? And then each time we kind of have some sort of word that helps continue it to is or because. The class is taking turns to share where their family came from. And he does not know where his family is from. Okay, he doesn't know all that stuff. So he's like, what are the primary causes of Dominic's anxiety? That's a really fancy way to say, what are the main reasons, primary causes, main reasons of Dominic's anxiety? Why does he get so, like, tight stomach, anxious, a little worked up, sweaty almost? What are the main reasons? So this is how we could say the primary causes of Dominic's anxiety is, what are some of those main reasons? I think it's that he doesn't know his family and he just wants to fit in and have friends, but doesn't know how to do that. Alright, remember you can pause at any time to write these down. I am expecting these complete descriptive sentences, just like it says up here, not short bullet point answers. This is a time to work on expanding these skills. And remember we talked about it might seem hard, but it's something kind of newer for us, and we don't just take the easy way out. We have that good integrity and we do what we need to. Alright, so then your homework for today is to do chapter 1 and 2 questions. So this page here, okay, because this next page we'll do tomorrow. So 1 and 2 questions. It says, answer each question in complete quality and cursive sentences. I will change that, and you just need to do complete quality. But if you would like to practice your cursive, this is a great opportunity to do that, okay? So when it tells you here at the end, if you forget where you can look back, it tells you which chapter you can find stuff in, okay? So answer those questions in complete full sentences like we practiced up here. Then you do need to draw a portrait of Dominic's dream family. Okay, it should have a little bit of color. It doesn't need to be the Mona Lisa, but it should be a quality work. Okay, a portrait, a nice picture, a nice painting picture. And then describe his family down below. And over here, in at least one quality paragraph, write about the dream family. So this means 3 sentences or more. Okay, explaining about Dominic's dream family. A little caption here, but then tell about his dream family over here. All right, so that's what you're doing tonight. Before you watch our next video where we'll read chapters 3, 4, and 5, you do need to finish this. I'm not asking for a picture or anything. I'm trusting you to do your work and to do it honestly and fairly. All right. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see you soon, 4th graders.